The basic principle of applied behavior analysis, or ABA, is that every behavior is preceded by an antecedent and followed by a consequence. So an antecedent is put into place which leads to a behavior occurring and is followed by a consequence. An antecedent is also known as a stimulus. A behavior is also known as a response. The consequence either acts as a reinforcer, which will increase the likelihood the behavior will occur again, or as a punisher, which will decrease the chance the behavior occurring again. So let's take a look at this again. An antecedent or stimulus is presented, which is followed by a behavior or a response, which is followed by a consequence. Consequences can either increase or decrease the likelihood a student will display a behavior or response in the future. When the student responds correctly, the instructor should provide reinforcement, which here is represented by the capital R and lowercase f. So let's take a look at a scenario of when a student responds correctly. A stimulus is presented. For example, the teacher says, "When did Columbus discover America?" The student provides their response. For example, the student says, 1492. Then the consequence is provided. In this example, the student got the answer correct, so the teacher would provide reinforcement to the student. Yes, you got it. So what happens when a student makes an error? On this slide are examples of error correction procedures. An error correction is usually provided by the instructor when the student does not respond to the stimulus that is presented or responds incorrectly to the stimulus presented. There are three common ways to correct an error. The first would be to model the correct response. So in the earlier example, when the teacher provides the stimulus, "When did Columbus discover America?" if the student provided the wrong response to the teacher would model the correct response. Columbus discovered America in 1492. The second way to correct an error would be to ask the student to correct the error. So when the stimulus is presented, "When did Columbus discover America?" and the incorrect response occurs, the teacher would say the correct answer. Finally, the third way to deal with a student error is by ignoring the error and continuing on with instruction. So again, in the above example, the teacher provides the stimulus, "When did Columbus discover America?" and the student responds incorrectly. The teacher will just move on and present another stimulus like, "What ship did he sail on?" Often when using this option, the teacher will present the stimulus again several trials later. This option is used when students are either prompt dependent or are reinforced by providing an incorrect response. Reinforcement is when behavior increases by adding or taking something away. So what is positive reinforcement? It is when a person gains access to something after exhibiting the behavior that makes the behavior more likely to occur in the future. So you add something to make the behavior increase in the future. Here's an example of positive reinforcement. The teacher provides a stimulus, "Name the carnivorous dinosaur." The student provides a response, "Tyrannosaurus rex." The teacher provides positive reinforcement, "Well done." The expression, "well done," is added and is likely to increase the future of this response in the presence of this particular stimulus. Remember, reinforcement is when the behavior increases by adding or taking something away. We have talked about adding something, which is positive reinforcement. Now let's look at negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is when something is removed or delayed after the behavior occurs that makes the behavior more likely to occur in the future. Here are some common examples of negative reinforcement. Timeout can be negative reinforcement because some students like escaping an activity that is not preferred or even for timeout. Another example is when an academic demand of some sort is removed. This can lead to an increase in the behavior that led to the academic demand being removed. Finally, if a staff member is working with a student and the student does not particularly like the staff member, the student might exhibit a behavior that will lead the staff member to walk away, which may end up leading the student engaging in this behavior more often. Here's an example of negative reinforcement. The stimulus is a foul smell under the kitchen sink. The behavior that occurs after the foul smell is detected is that the trash is taken out. The consequence is that the foul smell has been removed, which occurred by taking something away. Now the foul smell is gone, it is likely to increase the behavior of taking the trash out in order to remove the foul smell. It is important that the instructor spends time identifying appropriate reinforcers for each student. Here's a list of common categories of reinforcement and examples under each category. When selecting a reinforcer, it must be more powerful than the naturally occurring reinforcer. To identify a strong reinforcer for a student, a preference assessment can be used that will help identify these reinforcers. This is a formal assessment that is given to a student to help narrow down and identify a powerful reinforcer. After identifying which reinforcers you will use with a particular student, only deliver those contingent upon the target behavior occurring. So if you have identified that the student is very reinforced by listening to a particular music CD, then you will only use this as a reinforcer for certain target behaviors and not all behaviors to be reinforced. Finally, it is important to know that there are many different reinforcement strategies that will be discussed in more detail to come. Non-contingent reinforcement is when a student is reinforced whether or not the target behavior occurs. For example, if a teacher presents the following stimulus by asking, "When did Columbus discover America?" and the student answers incorrectly, but the teacher still provides the student a reinforcer, this is an example of non-contingent reinforcement. It is important to note that there is very little research to support the use of non-contingent reinforcement. Differential reinforcement is reinforcing only those behaviors that meet a specific criterion, usually on-task behaviors that you are targeting, and all other responses will not be reinforced, meaning they will go into extinction. One type of differential reinforcement is differential reinforcement of other behaviors, also known as DRO. This is reinforcement that is delivered when a set interval of time elapses, and any behaviors other than the challenging behavior has occurred. So if targeting the challenging behavior of hitting, you would only reinforce the student after the set time. For example, 5 minutes has gone by with the student not hitting. Differential reinforcement of incompatible behaviors, also known as DRI, is when reinforcement is delivered when a student exhibits a behavior that is incompatible with challenging behavior.